Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
If analysis is your calling, as it is, say, in Cut the Clutter, I need data, I need facts, because I have to lift the layers over a complexity. The important thing is to get reliable data. Now, for the past many years, that's what's been lacking, particularly with the 2021 census not having been held, the consumer survey not having been held, and also the 2007-18, the last household consumption expenditure survey done in 2017-18 having been junked. It was seen to be flawed by Modi government. Of course, Modi government critics said that's because it did not show Modi government in a good light, so they junked it. Whatever, it was junked because the government said that this is flawed, particularly because it followed in the year, it took place in the year immediately after demonetization. That was in 2016-17. So 2017-18 did not see the light of day. A lot of the analysis, a lot of the debate in this country, from incomes, poverty levels, welfare plans, urbanization, rural versus urban, who's happier, who's more unhappy, minimum support prices, are people starving, are people hungry? If people are hungry, why aren't you seeing them on the street, lying on the footpaths? And if people are not hungry, then why is India featuring so poorly in the global hunger index? All of those debates have taken place in a fact-free environment or a data-free environment. So what we have right now, earlier this week, this analysis came out. It was released late last week, so it was only by earlier this week, that's by Monday, Tuesday, that we've been able to get as much of the data as possible, because right now, only the highlights have been made public. The full report will come out later. But great blessing, manna from the heaven, you want to call it something else, you can call it that. For if you are an analyst, you've now got the Modi government's findings of its first household consumption expenditure survey. What does it tell us? It tells us how much do Indians spend in a month, that is in rural India, state by state. It is broken down state by state. So you can also see regional diversity, etc. Also, what is it that they spend their money on? So you know how many, at which level, the bottom 5%, the top 5%, and every 5% in between. For some reason, in this language, these are called fractile. So for a moment, I was stumped. I didn't know what fractile was. I tried to Google it. Even the dictionary confused me. So I had half a mind of maybe telling you all that, look, I don't know what fractile is. So agar tumhi samajh sako, mujhe bhi samjhana. Like, you know my weakness for old Hindi film songs. That said, I now understand it a little bit better. Fractile is nothing. It's just a fraction. So you see the bottom 5% is people at that income level, top 5% people at that income level, and then you break it down at every 5% level. We are not going into all the details of that, but the fact is now that data is available. So you know what is the gap between the rich and the poor. It's not like the rich and the poor is not the poorest person in some part of deep eastern UP or deep western Bihar, or maybe in some part of Odisha, etc. Compared with Adani or Ambani, not like that. But it's all a question of averages. Data, statistics is about averages. So on an average, what does the poorest person spend? On an average, what does the richest person spend, or richest persons spend? That is how analysis is done. A lot of the data is available to us now. Now, what is it that the data tells us? I picked out a few highlights for you, which I will list, and then I will go into some of these on a granular basis. Not all of this, because if I do that, it'll take a couple of hours, and I know that you are very patient with me. You won't have the patience for that. Plus, I'm quite sure I will myself get confused. So what I'll do is, the link to the document with all the highlights that Niti Aayog has released. I will share that with you with the description of this episode of Cut The Clutter. So please do check it out yourself. However, there are the 6 highlights from this as I pick them up. Number 1, it shows that poverty is down. Now, CEO of Niti Aayog, BBR Subramaniam, who is a respected senior civil servant, IAS officer, he said that this data shows that poverty, that abject poverty is down below 5%. Now, this is a lot better even than the last survey that this government did on multi-dimensional poverty in India. That would have put the number of people below the poverty line at about 10 to 11%. This one puts it below 5%. Now, multi-dimensional poverty, that looked at how did you have your child going to school, what was infant mortality, nutrition, many other things. Did you possess something? Did you have a possession, a bicycle, a buffalo, maybe a goat, stuff like that? In this case, this goes simply based on how much did you spend in a month. And on that basis, Niti Aayog says poverty is now down below 5% in India, which is not implausible, because if you buy the 10-11% figure on multidimensional poverty, then below 5% is fine. Now, it doesn't mean that those who are above the poverty line are rich. They are not rich. They are still poor. They are still quite poor, in fact. But poverty line has a specific definition. Because so few are below the poverty line now, once again, it's a claim that the Niti Aayog makes that absolute destitution in India has mostly disappeared now. Once again, you can find a lot of poor people. Most Indians still are very poor. But destitution, I would remember from my early days, childhood, teen years, after that also, and as would many of you, coming into Delhi from a small town or going to Bombay for the first time, you found so many thousands of people lined up on the footpath at night, just sleeping on the footpath because they had nowhere to go. Now you might say, oh, now they are in slums. Life in slums is subhuman. Yet the fact is that you don't see so many people on footpaths, and that tells you that destitution has been declining. Once again, they are not becoming rich. The decline or disappearance of destitution does not mean that people have become middle class or even new middle class. They probably are still quite poor, but it's all relative, and a question of how much deprivation somebody suffers from. So there was a time, 60s, 70s, when it was routine. In fact, poverty was described as lakhs of people sleeping on the streets. And it was that destitution that you could see most clearly on the streets of the big cities of India. That inspired Sahir Ludhianvi to write in 1958 for a 1958 film, Fir Subah Hogi, Chino Arab Hamara, Hindustan Hamara, Rehne ko ghar nahi hai, Sara Jahan Hamara. It was also a kind of a parody or maybe satire on something that Iqbal had written. Chino Arab Hamara, Hindustan Hamara, Muslim hai hum watan hai, Sara Jahan Hamara. Sahir was a leftist, but there was a telltale line in that one. And that said, jitni bhi buildingein hain, sethon ne baant li hain, footpath Mumbai ke hain aashiyan hamara. So that was a tribute to the wide destitution in India that brought people from rural India into big cities. They had nowhere to go to, not even a slum. And so you found them on the footpath. So that kind of destitution is now over. I've taken a couple of minutes explaining this because poverty, the absence of abject poverty, the absence of or the decline of the people below this poverty line, it does not mean that they are not poor. It does not mean they are not needy. All it means is, and it's a good thing, that the destitution of the kind that we had in the past is not there. So in fact, the Niti Aayog CEO says that even if you go to 2010-11, when the poverty line was below 30-31 rupees, and you apply the principle of inflation, today it doubles. Even using that yardstick, the absolutely poor people below the poverty line is below 5%. So yet again, for the 17th time already in this episode of Cut the Clutter, it does not mean that the poor have ceased to be poor. It is that just that the most poor are now not as poor as they used to be. So this is a work in progress. It's a large country with a lot of people who are still very poor. That said, with all those caveats, I go on further. So the next point is the rural-urban gap is closing. It has not come too close, but it is closing. How is it closing? 2004-05, the same survey, the same household expenditure survey. 2004-05, the gap between urban spending and rural spending was 91%. So an urban Indian spent almost twice as much as the rural Indian. The gap was 91%. The gap is still substantive, but it is somewhere between 69 to 71% according to the survey, depending on how you calculate. But you can say 71%. So what was a 91% gap has now become 71% gap. At the same time, you can see that rapid urbanization is taking place. People are moving from villages to the cities in search for better opportunities. And again, income levels in cities are much better. So all of that you can extrapolate from data that's been thrown up by this survey, and you can arrive at those conclusions. Number 3, spending power in the country has gone up. So compared to 2011-12, the last survey, to now 2022-23, the spending power has gone up 3 times. So once again, I know the question, all of you are questioning people, you will say, "Arey, at the same time, inflation has gone up." Yes, inflation has gone up, but if you apply the inflation that's taken place in this decade, it would become about 2x. So inflation has taken the value to what you're spending by twice as much, but your spending power is thrice as much. So that is 50%. That tops the inflation figure by 50%, which is a very good thing. So inflation has made it twice as expensive as compared to 2010-11, but you are now spending 3 times as much. That is progress. Next point, that food spending is down. Now that's very important. And I know that the moment this comes out, that Indians are spending less on food, Indians don't have enough to eat. It is not that. The story is not, the data is not telling us that people are not spending enough on food. People are still spending on food. It is just that as a percentage of their total spending on food has come down. For example, I'm giving you notional figures right now, then I will get into more granular figures. Suppose in 1991 or 1990-1991, you had an income, you had a spending in a month of 100 rupees. Out of those 100 rupees, you probably spent 55 rupees or 57 rupees or 60 rupees on just food. Then you were left with very little. Today, that spending for rural areas is about 46 rupees. For urban areas is 39 rupees. And you can see declining year upon year upon year. You are not spending less on food. You are spending more on food than you did before. It's just that your incomes have gone up. Your needs have gone up. So what are you spending more on? You're spending more on medical care. You're spending more on education for your children. You're spending more on conveyance, very important, transport. And most importantly, you are spending a lot more on durable goods. That's from mobile phones to refrigerators to automobiles, stuff like that. So things that add to quality of life. But the food as a share of your overall spending basket, think of your overall spending like a thali, like a platter, right? On that platter, if food was this big, today it's this big, but lots of other things have come in. That is the difference that has come about. The spending on food is not down. Within food, that's the next point. Within food, spending on cereals plus pulses plus oil, edible oil plus sugar, that has declined. Once again, don't misread it to mean, although I'm sure a lot of people will say, that means Indians don't have enough grain to eat. That is not the story. Indians have enough grain to eat. It is just that Indians, they're spending, they don't need to now spend a bulk of a large part of their incomes or their spending basket or spending platter on cereals, on roti, dal, chawal, ghee, oil, stuff like that. They now spend a lot more on milk, on fruits, on vegetables, meat, poultry, fish, stuff like that. So high protein rich and micronutrient rich diets like fruits and vegetables. Those have gone up. So once again, people are going up the value chain. So sometimes you find a lot of the stuff that comes out in some publications, and it's also ideologically driven to say that, oh, India's per capita grain consumption has come down. If India's per capita food grain consumption comes down, even so, even if such a thing happens, it is because it is replaced by something else. So instead of eating 8 rotis or maybe a full thali of rice at one point of time, you now have maybe 6 rotis or 4 rotis, but you have you have a lot more of maybe dahi, maybe you're drinking more milk, you're having more paneer, etc., etc. And I will give you some granular data, which is quite telling. And for that data, we have to thank this survey. So once again, among food spending on food, the share of cereals has declined greatly. It has some other implications also on the entire MSP debate. I will come to that as we go along with granular data, as I said. And next point, and the last point, my 6 highlights, last point is that the South is much better off than all of the North. If you drew a line across the Vindhyas, so peninsular India and the South, and the rest, the South is doing much better. And I will show you some graphics also to explain that. And once again, while it is doing generally better than the North, I find it a bit unscientific to divide India between North and the South, because we tend to see the North as the Hindi heartland. The North is not a synonym for Hindi heartland. Hindi heartland is the Hindi heartland. That includes central India, which is not the North, just because it's north of the Vindhyas. Vindhyas actually abut Madhya Pradesh, which is central India. But central India, parts of most of Rajasthan, Bihar, etc., large parts of UP, they are not really northern India. Northern India also includes some richer states like Haryana and Punjab, which have very little common with the Hindi heartland. So if you see the Hindi heartland, the South is doing enormously better. As part of this, another fact that follows is the region in India that's doing the poorest is Eastern India, and that defies the northern definition, because Eastern India that is the poorest. That said, I will go into some granular detail as we go along. So first of all, look at this graphic. This graphic and this bunch of graphics, my colleague Nikhil Rampal, who's been working with us all this while but has now gone to do his MBA to Europe. So he's right now in Rome at his institution, and he's done this work from there, and I will share with you also a link to his story. He shows us, and it's a color-coded graphic. So first of all, remember a basic data point, or maybe 2 basic data points. One, how large was this sample? So this sample, it is done very scientifically. Don't tell me, oh, a country of 140 crore people, how can you sample 260,000 people? That's what we always hear when we see a Pew survey or we see an opinion poll. Now, in any case, opinion polls in Indian psephology have become so discredited that that's not an example I should use. But when you see a Pew survey or something and people say, with 200,000 people or 50,000 people, how can you tell me what a country is thinking? It's not like that. Surveying is not an art, it's a craft. It's a craft and a science. So a lot goes into choosing these samples and also asking the right questions and doing the right analysis. The methodology you can read in that document from Niti Aayog, of which I have shared a link with you. So this sample all over India was 261,746 households, not people, households, of which 1,55,014 are rural, 155,014 are rural, and 1,06,732, that is 106,732 are urban. Now, that is the first data point. Second, what is the big headline figure it throws up? The headline figure it throws up is that average rural household in India spent in this year, 2022-23, 3,860 rupees per person, not per family, per person. So a family of 5, you multiply this by 5, right? So 3,860 per person per month. In urban areas, it's 6,521. I told you the difference is about 71%. So that is the one basic figure. So you will see this chart and you will see this figure. That's the basic figure we think about. And then we see the first chart is comparison of rural expenditures by state. Green is better, pale is worse, yellow, orange gets worse. And the darker the green gets, the better it is. So if you see this chart of rural India, average, as I told you, average spending is 3,860 rupees. But what is the greenest? Kerala is the greenest, 5962. In fact, is one state that's even greener than Kerala. So just search the map. Can you find that state? I'll give you 2 seconds. All right. If you haven't found it, go east. I told you east is the poorest part of India, but go northernmost. In the east, right above the Siliguri neck, which joins the northeast with India, you will find a tiny state of Sikkim. Sikkim has 7,787 rural spending per capita. That is more than twice as much as the national average. So Sikkim that way is the highest, but it's a very small state, very tiny state. Among states of any size above 1 crore, Kerala has the highest spending. It is the greenest, that is 5,960. It is also the least rural state in some ways. Kerala, I would say, is our most urban state, right? It's sometimes difficult to say what is rural and what is urban. So Kerala is 5,960. That's all of this is at least 1.5 times higher than the national average. Tamil Nadu is 5,457. Andhra, nearly 5,000. Karnataka, little over 4,500. Telangana, nearly 5,000. All of these are states in the green. Then Maharashtra is light green, just over 4,000, right? I told you, north of the Vindhyas is all much better. So all of the north of the Vindhyas is green. But when you go above the south of India, then to find green, you have to come to Delhi, Haryana, and Punjab. All the rest of the country south of the Vindhyas does quite poorly. In fact, Rajasthan, we had one more episode of Cut The Clutter just the other day, just a couple of months back when state elections were going on. And we had talked about how Rajasthan has broken away from the Bimaru pack. So you can see Rajasthan is over 4,000, 4,348. And there is a little surprise there, which is counterintuitive for me. And I also rechecked the data. I rechecked the data also on what the government put out. The data is all from what the government put out. And that is that Gujarat does so poorly on rural spending and by implication on rural incomes. So Gujarat is 3,820 rupees, which is not only much lower than the progressive quote unquote or industrialized states in the south. I'm making that comparison because Gujarat is also a coastal state. It's also an industrialized and fast industrializing state. And that is where the Gujarat model, etc. came up and catapulted Mr. Modi into this great popularity. So Gujarat rural spending is very poor. It's 3,820, which is almost 500 rupees less or 528 rupees less than Rajasthan, which we think of, which is the R in the Bimaru pact. So Gujarat rural spending is less than Rajasthan. Maharashtra is barely in the green, but still in the green. And then you go east, and then you will find the palest of our states. The palest of our states are Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh. They are all in the 3,000 rupee threshold. Madhya Pradesh, in fact, 3,158. Even lower than Uttar Pradesh, which is 3,277, which in turn is much lower than Haryana, 4,912, and so on and so forth. In fact, even Bihar, rural spending is more than rural spending in Uttar Pradesh. Not by very much, by just about 170, 180 rupees, but once again, counterintuitive to me. Now, if you had asked me before I had seen this data from this survey, I would have said, no. Rural spending in Bihar has to be much lower than UP because UP is on the rise. But this data from Modi government tells you a very different story. Come to the next chart. That is urban spending. Again, the color coding is about the same. States in the south are mostly green. And once again, states in the south, which are the greenest on rural spending are also the greenest in urban spending, with one difference. You can see that Tamil Nadu in this case, rural spending, Kerala was the highest, Tamil Nadu was a close second. In this case, Tamil Nadu is the highest in the south and among major states in the country, the second highest in the country. So Tamil Nadu is 7742, Kerala is 7102. See those numbers on the map. We'll also have a pointer running on them. But there's a very interesting thing there. Look at Telangana, which is the major state which has the highest urban spending in the country. It is landlocked Telangana, 8,251 rupees. Isn't that quite remarkable? Because then you come to Haryana, which has Gurgaon. It is 7,948. And Delhi is 8,250. Delhi is all a city, barring maybe the Asian Games village or Sainik Farms village and all stuff like that. And some villages of Delhi, I'm being facetious. But Telangana has as much urban spending on an average as even the city-state of Delhi, 8251. Now that is the magic of Hyderabad and the growth of Hyderabad, also the entrepreneurship of the people of Telangana. So Telangana has the highest number, and once again, Andhra is not doing too badly, 6877. But once again, if you go north of the Vindhyas, then figures become more and more dismal, and Hindi heartland again brings up the bottom. And yet again, for urban spending also, Madhya Pradesh does really poorly. Madhya Pradesh is lower than Uttar Pradesh. In this case, Bihar is lower than Uttar Pradesh, but Bihar also hardly has any cities. Bihar has not built any urban areas. Bihar is still probably our most rural large state. Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand in the same ballpark. Odisha not doing so badly. Odisha on urban spending is better, little bit better, but still better than Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, which is a surprise to me. West Bengal, again not bad. West Bengal also, or urban spending, is better than Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, marginally. Even so, on rural spending also, Bengal might be little bit better, fractionally better than Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. And once again, it sets to rest many shibboleths and many preconceived notions that we might have. Then we come to average monthly expenditure. I told you it has tripled in the last decade. So see this chart, this tells you, and this actually takes you back to 1999, 2000. Their average rural expenditure was 486 and urban was 855. In 2011-12, a decade earlier than this one, it was 1,430 rupees for rural and 2,630 for urban. See now, it has tripled in this case over the past decade, almost tripled in the past decade. And again, if you extrapolate going back almost 25 years to 99, 2000, you will find that average Indians have done 50% better on their spending power compared to inflation, which is all good news. Of course, everything could be much better than it is. Rural-urban gap, I told you earlier, it's declining, and I said I will give you more granular data. So I can do no better than share this graphic with you. See, between 1999 and 2000, the rural-urban gap actually has increased a little bit. From 2004-05, it has begun to decline, and then it declines quite fast after 2011-12. So 2004-05, UPA comes to power. It starts declining. It declines over 10 years, and then Modi government comes to power. It declines even more steeply. That's why the gap, which at one point had risen up to 91%, is now about 70-71%. I told you earlier, depending on how you calculate, between 69 to 71%. Again, good news, still a lot of gap, but again, it confirms our thesis that India has to urbanize more. India has to build more cities because that's where the opportunity is. Then families in the northeast and southern states. That's a telling graphic. I told you earlier that the south is generally doing so much better than the states north of the Vindhyas. I will not calling them northern states because Bihar is not a northern state, right? Or Chhattisgarh is not a northern state. So states generally north of the Vindhyas. The south is doing well. The surprise also is that the northeast is doing very well. And this graphic just gives you a simple bar chart showing the urban and rural spending in the south, the northeast, the north, the west and the east, which is the lowest. South is the highest, northeast is the second highest, east is the lowest, and then you can see the all India figure excluding the South. The reason we have excluded the South there is so you can see the difference between the southern states and all the rest of India, because it's not because this South and the rest of India. I refuse to call it North South. South versus the rest of India debate keeps going on. Now we have data to give you some more details and give you more authentic analysis on this. Now we bring you some more details on the most important points from, in my understanding, that this survey tells us. That is the decline of food as a share of our expenses. We are not eating less. We are not spending less on food. It is just as a decline of our total spend. What does that mean? What is the data telling us? So if you see rural India in 1999-2000 spent 59.4%. So if rural India spent 1,000 rupees in a month, 1,000 rupees in a month on everything, 594 rupees out of that 1,000 rupees was spent on food. Food of various kinds, all kinds of food, 594 out of 1,000. Today, it has come down to 464. Now, you might say 46% is still a lot, but it's a lot less than 59.5%. And that is the decline in the rural India consumption patterns. And you can see this has moved on from decade to decade. 1999-2000, 59.4%. 2004-05, it is 53.1%. 2011-12 series survey, 52.9%, and now the decline is quite sharp. It is 46.4%, and I know many people would say, oh, maybe that's because Modi government is giving free grain to people. So imputed value of that grain has been added in this spend. And in fact, even if you stretch it, all you can stretch it to is about 47.47%. So that is a big decline in food as a share of our total spending. So what that means is you are not eating less, but if you're spending less of your income on food, that means you are earning more, which also means you have more to spend on other things. Now, what do we spend more on? That I will tell you as we go ahead. But look at the urban sample. Urban sample in 1999-2000, urban Indians spent 48.1% of all their spending in a month on food, 48.1%. Today, it has come to 39.2%. So again, using that 1,000 rupee formula, if a person spent, or if a family spent 1,000 rupees per family member, in a month of that, 481 went to food. Today, only 392 goes to food. So the 100 odd rupees or 90 odd rupees that are now spared can go into buying durable goods, conveyance, mobile phones, education, medical care, anything. So this resource is being shifted from food to other things simply because you have simply because you have larger income available. Once again, all this calculation is not by volume of food. It's not to say somebody was eating 2 kilos of grain every week or 5 kilos of grain every week is now eating 4 kilos. Not like that. It is by value. It is by value of the money that you are spending on each item. And I will also then come to what is it that families are spending more on. So while the share of food in the overall basket has come down, within food, the share of food grain has come down. So how do we define food grain? That is food grain, wheat, rice, millets, etc., pulses, oil seeds, sugar also. So if you see all of that, the share of that food grains plus pulses plus oil seeds plus sugar, that share is declining, and even out of the already diminished as a percentage of total spend, household spending on food, the share of cereals is coming down. And what is it being replaced by? It's being replaced by milk. In fact, the spending on milk today is much more than cereals and pulses put together. So atta, dal, chawal, all put together, families are spending, individual families on an average are spending more on milk in India. Similarly, there is more spending going on fruits and vegetables. And if you add fruits and vegetables together, the spend per person spent is more than the spend on food grain. That's the important part. So vegetables are more than, once again, I'm dicing the same data in different ways. The spend on vegetables is more than cereals. The spend on fruits is more than pulses. So an average Indian spends more on fruits than dal, more on vegetables than atta, chawal, rice, wheat, millets, stuff like that. What is growing? What is growing is the share of eggs, fish, meat, and this survey also tells us, very good data point, that average Indians now increasingly prefer animal protein over plant protein. Where does plant protein come from? Mostly from dal, some from some food grains also, but mostly dals. But Indians prefer animal protein, and don't think I'm wading into vegetarian, non-vegetarian debate, because milk also is an animal source of protein. So milk, paneer, the protein you get from that is also animal protein. So Indians are spending a lot more on animal proteins than on plant proteins, and there is a shift. That is what this survey tells us. What this does is, this fits in with well-known economic theories that as income goes up, people's share of spend on food comes down. Now, if you go to a really rich family, you might say, oh, family of so and so, they earn 5 crores a year. I'm just giving you a notional figure. They earn 5 crores a year, but on food, they spend as much as the family, as a family that earns 1 lakh a year. That is probably true. That's because the higher your income level, the lower the share of food in your overall spend. And that is what this growth tells you. Now, this tells you, I told you this will also give us some indicators towards the MSP debate and also an agriculture debate. So if you see the items whose consumption is going up, fruits and vegetables up 4.5%, dairy, meat, right? Dairy is not meat, all meat, dairy, goat rearing, pig rearing, meat. So dairy and meat, that has gone up 5.4%, fruits and vegetables 4.5%, dairy and livestock 5.4%, fisheries growing by 7.1%. This is humongous growth, right? In comparison, cereals, food grain, which is rice, wheat, a couple of pulses, not all pulses, right, wheat, a couple of pulses, a couple of oil seeds, and sugar cane. We might understand this better with a larger data point, that food grains, pulses, oil seeds, sugar, throw in cotton as well. These are all the crops that are covered with MSP, covered by MSP. All of these together account for only 28%, 28% of our agriculture or farm output. The rest, 72%, is poultry, dairy, fisheries, and many other ancillary activities. So that is how the character of agriculture has changed. And that also underlines to us the limitations of MSP as a stimulus for agriculture now. All of them together, they've just gone up by 1.9%. Now, what is the key point to look at there? That all of this rice, wheat, sugarcane, some pulses, oil seeds, which have grown by 1.9%, these are all the products which are supported by MSP. So what is supported by MSP is going up by 1.9%. What is not supported by MSP is going up by fruits and vegetables 4.5, dairy and livestock 5.4, fisheries 7.1. So what is the analytical point? The analytical point I will give you here is that wherever the farmer is aligned with the markets, the farmer knows how to deal with the markets. And as prices go up, as demands go up, farmer produces more and earns more. And that's why it is the farmers who are liberated from MSP regime who are doing that much better and their products are growing. However, those who are caught in the trap of the MSP regime, they keep on growing what they are growing because they are used to getting an assured buyer at an assured price. And that's why they are caught in this trap. That's the reason I call it the MSP trap. So what is not growing in Indian agriculture is entirely what is now supported by MSP. So when you say give us MSP for everything else, you know what you're doing, because one set of Indian farmers are aligned with the market, they are dealing with the market. The other set of Indian farmers have been protected from the market or divorced from the market or maybe quarantined from the market. The first lot is growing on an average by 6%, about 6%. The other lot, the protected lot, is growing by 1.9%. And to me, that is the most important takeaway. So in conclusion, I will also share a couple more charts with you, and I will not waste your time. I love the sound of my voice. I can go on. So I will not waste your time. Look at these charts, because these charts give you, again, very granular data on what is going up, where spending is going up for households, where it's coming down, and you can see how it's coming down for cereals. If you look at rural India, in fact, for cereals, it is less than 1/3 of what it was in 99-2000. So 99-2000, an average rural household spend per person, 37.4% of its overall spent on food grain. Today, it's just 10.59%. That is almost three and a half times less in comparison. What has gone up? What's gone up is milk and vegetables. What's gone up is milk, vegetables, fruits, and then you can also see some other things. You can see more spending on durables, and the same thing by and large applies to urban India as well. Cereals have come down over these 30 years from 25.78% to 9.21%. Again, about 1/3. Pulses down by about 50%. Milk was always high, remains high. Important thing is that the milk spending by urban Indians today is 50% more than their total spending on cereals and pulses. Roti, chawal, millets, dal, right? All of it together, they spend 50% more on milk than they spent on all of this. So these are important lessons to learn from this survey. And once again, think about MSP. Think about this paradox also, that some of India's most progressive farmers who embraced green revolution first of all, and who embraced the green revolution possible. Farmers of Punjab, what is now Haryana, what became Haryana, Western UP, etc. Those are the farmers which are caught in the MSP trap and are demanding MSP for more crops. There, the growth rate is only 1.9%. Consumption of these products is going down as household expenditure, whereas they are largely cut out from the markets that are really growing in the country. And that's what gives us, sorry for that cheap pun, that's what gives us some more food for thought.